sitting up here, some of them. And then the scientists who brought it right over here. So thank you very much. I want to thank the church for having us here. This is a first meeting, and it will hopefully be more meetings as we learn more about the case. We're hoping to give you an understanding of the case tonight. We've had an opportunity to talk a little bit individually with you. We're not planning a formal question and answer period tonight, but if you do have questions, there's not a lot of people here. I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. But it's important for you guys to recognize that this case is just getting started. All right, so let me tell you a little bit. We have some other people speaking in addition to myself. That's not it. How about this one? There it is. Okay. Great. So this is the class action complaint. So we're lawyers that do environmental work, and we filed a class action complaint in federal court. And unlike a lot of other cases that we do, we're not suing the regulators. This isn't about regulators. This is about trespass and nuisance on people's property. Okay? It's a type of law that kind of transcends. It goes beyond just whether the regulators are doing right or wrong. It relates to whether or not you, as a person, and your property have been affected by pollution, by a responsible party, or in a lawsuit, they're called a defendant. So that's the page of the lawsuit. And I want you to know that we're filming this tonight. It's going to be posted on our webpage, and we'll be able to answer questions through that. But the reason we're being somewhat restricted on questions and answers again now is because there's as many as 3,800 houses in this area. So, I was born in Fresno, California. And I grew up in the Central Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area. Went to San Jose State. My family still lives out here. I never lived in Southern California, but my wife's family in Southern California. But I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I've been practicing environmental law for 40 years. And we've assembled a group of expert lawyers that I don't think you can find a better group around anywhere. So we got me over there. That's my skinny picture right there at the top. Got Cheryl Thigpen. She's one of the lawyers with me. She's right up here. Cheryl, what's your name? Got Chris Nidell. Chris and his partner, Mr. Nace. Chris is a chemical engineer and a lawyer. He ran a pharmaceutical plant on the East Coast. So the unique ability he has of practicing almost 20 years of environmental law is he understands the chemistry and the engineering that goes into how pollution works, how it happens, what the processes were at the plant. And he is going to tell you about that in a minute. So we're going to introduce our folks. We're going to have Chris explain the processes. We have some experts over here that are going to explain to you the scientific principles that are involved. And then we're going to wrap it up. So this is the introduction part. We're going to have opportunities, no questions during the discussion. I know everybody's going to want to have questions, but we're not going to do that. We're going to present it to you and this information because we have an active lawsuit going right now. Okay? No questions? I know it's so hard. Please.
You said we though, so who assembled the team? Who's we?
Okay, okay. That's what I'm doing.
That's only fair to us.
It's only fair. The assembled team are these 4 law firms, and these are the principal lawyers involved. So this is my law firm, Environmental Energy and Natural Resources Advocates. We're located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I practiced law for 41 years. 38 of it has been environmental law. For 20 years, I represented the bad guys, the big companies, the defendants, that typically see these sites. And then I started looking in the mirror and went to the other side. Cheryl's been practicing a few years with me. She's new to environmental law. She's very detailed, very thorough. Chris Nidell and Nix. Chris is from Washington, D.C. I already told you he's an environmental lawyer and a chemical engineer. His law firm's in Washington. We're starting to do cases together, but this team is assembled for specific, important pieces. So everybody on the legal team has unique and specific talents that add to the team. So Chris is going to talk to you about, in a few minutes, what happened at the site as a chemical engineer. His partner, Jonathan Ace, is not here tonight. He's in Washington, but he's also part of our team. The Lanier Law Firm, they're a worldwide, national, worldwide law. Mark Lanier, if you Google him or the Lanier Law Firm, you're going to hear about all of the big companies that he sued successfully. And right here with us, Chris, he's head of their environmental group of lawyers. So they have an office right there in Woodland Hills on Oxnard Street, their local office. So not only are they headquartered in Houston, and they got an office in New York, but they have a local office here also. And that's very important to have local folks. Alex Brown is not here with us tonight, but he is the head of the complex litigation group for that law firm. And Audrey Moore, she's a certified legal assistant. Marla, raise your hand.
Hi.
Just, where are you from?
I'm from here.
Yeah, and where do you work?
I work for the Lanier Law Firm.
And what's the address? No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, so she's right here too, okay? So we have a combination of out-of-town folks and local folks, okay? Then Gideon Krakow. And Jordan is not here because we got to mess up on the, he'll probably be here later. But Gideon is former city attorney for Los Angeles. He's at a California Air Resources Board meeting today in Sacramento. He's on the CAR board. He's on the South Coast Management District. He grew up in Brooklyn for 10 years. His mom and him moved here. He made a home here, went to Berkeley. He's a lawyer, he's a great environmental lawyer. And his colleague, Jordan, grew up in the Canoga Park area. Environmental lawyers, land use lawyers. Grew up in this area. He knows like where to get the best burgers. I mean, it's really, he's just a great group of people. So this is the legal team to assemble. Now what's important to know is if we need more folks, we'll bring them in. I think this is really sufficient, but we're prepared to do what it takes to represent the folks. So, this is what I kind of have fun. I didn't study science very well. I was kind of a latecomer, but we wanted to show you the scientific team we put together also. And these scientists, two of them are on the phone or on our Facebook page. One of them lives in University of Michigan professor Adam Finkel. He lives in New Hampshire. He's been on all of these governmental boards on risk assessment. And the reason we're going to talk about that is that one of the chemicals that's involved here does present some human health risk. So, but he's not here with us tonight. He's actually working on a landfill case in New Hampshire tonight. Another person that is not here tonight is Richard Litton. He's a professor at Cal State Fullerton. He knows groundwater in this area. He knows the players that have done work in this area. He's well known. And one of his colleagues, Renee Perez, is here with him. Actually, Richard's in Michigan teaching a class on how to drill a sampling well to Western Michigan students. But Renee Perez is here. He lives in Riverside, California. But where's your business here?
Tustin.
Tustin. And they practice all over the United States, but they're experts in hydrogeology, which follows when contamination gets into the water. They can determine where that water is going, where's it been, and where's it likely to finish up. Okay? Next to them is Kenneth Spaith. He's actually going to talk a little bit tonight. Kenneth is a doctor of occupational medicine. Now, what does that mean? So, he's a physician from Long Island, New York. We've worked with him before. His practice is to see people that have had environmental exposures. Most medical doctors don't have that training. He has the training to know that if you've been exposed to a contaminant, either in the workplace or in your home, your office, he has the expertise, along with your local physicians, to determine whether that particular disease could have reasonably originated from the exposures that we're concerned about or not. And what we're going to do, we brought him in here so he can tell you about the chemicals and what the possible issues are. Now, this is not the last time we're going to talk to you about this. This is an educational process. But Kenneth is here to do that. He's really, really good. Very good. Kevin Boyle. Kevin's from Virginia Tech. So he is our real estate expert. Okay? So these cases have to do with real estate. Because the contamination affects human health, Dr. Spaith, but it also affects your property. And Dr. Boyle is a real estate expert at Virginia Tech. He's an economist. He's an environmental economist. I like to say he wrote a book on environmental damages for the EPA. Not the only book, but a lot of important ones. He's well known around the world for understanding how, if your house or property that you own has been contaminated, does it affect it? Does it affect its value? If so, how so? So that's what Dr. Boyle does. And then we have my surfer dude over here named Dr. Mark Kramer. He's got the COVID bun, okay? And he asked me if he had to take it off, and I said, nah, come on, man. You know, it's surfer country here, right? So Mark is really the reason we're here. He lives in Goleta, near Santa Barbara. Went to school at San Diego State. UCSB. I mean, he grew up in Southern California. Okay, you went to Van Nuys High School? Yeah, okay. Dr. Mark Cram is an expert on something called vapor intrusion. And that means that there are certain chemicals, if they get into groundwater, they can actually kind of vaporize up out of the groundwater and through the soil and come into the atmosphere. And Mark is one of the two foremost experts in the United States in that area. No doubt about it. And he's been studying and looking at this site for 18 months and trying to figure out what's going on here. Now, not all these folks are going to talk tonight. We plan on, as we go along, to provide more information. But this is just the beginning of the case. So, that's the team. And Mr. Nidell is now going to explain to us the who, what, when, and where. Listen.
So my name is Chris Nidell. I'm an attorney, as Dave said, and I also have a master's degree in chemical engineering. I went to graduate school in chemical engineering, and I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a while. And it was working in the industry, in the chemical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, that I learned that I really didn't want to be on that side of these issues. I worked in a community that impacted with cancer and all those kind of things from the exposures that were, I think, attributable to the company that I worked for, and I wasn't comfortable with that, so I went to law school and became a lawyer, and I do, as Dave said, I've been doing environmental law for close to 20 years. I started at a big environmental firm in Texas, and I now have my own small firm. But the site that we're here talking about tonight is the former Litton site, or purchased by Northrop Grumman in 2001. But Litton had been operating there prior to Northrop Grumman since 1967. This is at the 80-20 Deering, so it's close by. We'll see the map. I mean, there's the map over there, but we'll have a map here. And that facility was closed in 2002, but it wasn't until very recently that there was any real discussion of the impact that facility operating there for, close to half a century had on the groundwater and on the community and the properties in the area. So what were they doing at that facility? They were doing a number of things involving the use of chlorinated solvents, what we call volatile organic chemicals, or chlorinated volatile organic chemicals, so the CVOCs, mostly trichloroethylene. That's the one that is the most often associated with the site. There are some other chemicals that were used there as well, or that were suspected as being used there. Perchloroethylene may have been used there in some volume. There was likely the use of preservatives in these chemicals that are also toxic on their own. So 1,4-dioxane is another chemical that is potentially associated with the contamination from this facility. But they were doing manufacturing activities, and they were largely involved in cleaning metals and doing the circuit board production. They were doing screen printing. They were doing chemical stripping with these chemicals. They were using these chemicals to process the printing and the cleaning of these metals. And one of the sources, the main source that's been identified, I think there's a pointer on here, but there was a clarifier, this concrete 4-basin clarifier that's been identified in the public record that was used at this facility. We see here, these 4 concrete bins were used to separate out the solids from their waste streams. And they would basically go in and settle in the first tank, go into the second tank, settle out more. And then it appears that the majority of this was flowed straight into the sewer system, and some of that also leaked directly into the ground. So we had this source, clarifiers identified on some of the diagrams for this facility. We see during the remediation and investigation for the facility where these clarifier tanks were. We see that noted again. And the problem is you have a situation where you have this facility leaking contaminated solvents, and what these do is they go down into the system, assuming that they go straight into the ground, or let's say here with the sewer line, but they go down into the groundwater system, impact the groundwater, and then they can start to flow. And that's how you get this big 2+ mile plume. And it may sound like once it's in the groundwater, it's sort of not a problem. But the problem with that, and this gets to Dr. Mark Cram and the point that Dave raised, is you have something called vapor intrusion. And what vapor intrusion is these chemicals that are in the groundwater, they vaporize, they essentially evaporate into the gases that are in the soils, and the pressure in the ground can then force those into your home. And so you may be living in a home that's on top of a plume. You have no idea that you're living on top of a plume, and that can enter into your home through cracks in your foundation. So typically they see this in indoor air testing. You can have these chemicals build up, and actually what they see sometimes is they build up. I mean, you probably have heard of radon, right? So radon does this. Radon comes from the ground, and the gas is released from radium rocks in the soil. That is the same mechanism. Those gases penetrate the home, and then they build up in the home over time. So if your windows are closed over the winter, you can have buildup. If they're closed over the summer with air conditioning, you have buildup. And if you're not getting a lot of ventilation in the homes, those levels can reach levels that are toxic and can lead to some of the health effects that we're concerned about with these chemicals. The other issue is that we know that they did use the sewer system for discharging some of their chemicals. And so not only do you have the entry directly into the house through the soil, but you also have direct entry points from the sewer system. So there's a pathway from the sewer system that goes through the seal at the base of your toilet, or if you have a floor drain in your garage, or you have a floor drain in your slab somewhere or a basement, those are points of entry from the sewer line from these same gases. So in the situation that you have here where they use the sewer and where there's a groundwater plume that extends both directly, or as we say preferentially, along the sewer line, but then also throughout the groundwater system, you have the potential for sort of both of these mechanisms or pathways of contamination into the home and ultimately exposure to people living in those homes. Okay? And we know that the contaminated groundwater migrated from the site basically in the southeast direction. And as I mentioned, these chlorinated solvents, mostly trichloroethylene, have the potential to migrate into the homes. And what this area is, and we have the map over there, but this is over 4,000 properties, your properties, your neighbors' properties, that are within this area. This area that we've identified, we have the facilities up here, so this southeast migration direction. We have this bump out for the sewer system where we believe there may have been preferential migration of some of those chemicals. But this area is defined based on it's likely that this area will change based on additional testing, based on additional information, based on time. But this is the area so far that we've identified as being above the levels that would be of some concern for people living in houses above the levels of contamination that are in the groundwater within this area, right? So it's likely that the contamination actually extends beyond this area. It's just that it's at decreasing levels once you get beyond that area. And again, I think I had some conversation with some people that are here tonight. This map is preliminary. This is what we believe things look like based on the evidence we have right now. But we're at the front end of this case. I know Dave has made the point, but we're really at the beginning. We don't have any of the defendant's internal documents. We don't have any of the information about the volume of chemicals and the duration of time that they were dumping and how much was put in the sewer versus in certain on-site disposal. But all of that information will be made available through the litigation process, and ultimately we will move to certify a class that's based on the best information available, which will look probably something like this, but may expand beyond this depending on what we find through litigation. So,
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Chris. One thing I forgot to tell everybody, and Chris reminded me. So, what we've learned is there's like 3 sites in the area. One of them's a Rocketine site, south of the river. That's not what we're talking about here, okay? The other one's up Santa Susana, up in Chetford. That's not what we're talking about here. I feel like I'm in the Southwest, flight attendant. If you're flying with Fresno, you're on the wrong flight. This one's going to Portland, right? Okay. So this is a site that has not been publicized. Okay. Now, Dr. Spaith is here to explain what this trichloroethylene is. And one thing that Chris pointed out, I just want to reemphasize, this is not like radon in the sense that it's naturally occurring. Trichloroethylene is a human-made chemical. Okay? So, Dr. Spaith will explain that. Well, the middle one's the pointer, and the right and left. Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Ken Spaith. As you can see up here, I'm a physician, and I have a fairly obscure area of expertise. I am board certified in an area of medicine called occupational and environmental medicine. It's actually a subspecialty of preventive medicine, and unlike most physicians, where when you go and you have an illness, the main focus is diagnosis and then treatment, right? And That's a little bit different than what I do. So my area of expertise is, in my practice, I see primarily folks who have been exposed to some sort of harmful substance. And then the question usually falls one of two ways. I've been exposed. Are there health risks for me now that I've been exposed? So that's one scenario that patients come to me with. The other is, they come with a diagnosis, and they say, is my diagnosis related to what I've been exposed to? So in my training and in my professional expertise, that's the question that I try to tackle. Now there are some treatment components to that once we get to a certain point, but the main reason they come to see me is to get one of those two questions answered. So essentially what I do is a form of toxicology, environmental toxicology. So, of the chemicals that you've heard about tonight, one of them is trichloroethylene. That seems to be one of the main ones here. In my practice, I have seen probably several hundred trichloroethylene exposed individuals, even in the past 5 or 10 years or so. So these are chemicals that I am very familiar with, that I see a lot clinically. There are also chemicals that I have served as an advisor to different unions and school boards and communities that have been affected by these chemicals. So I'm certainly no stranger to these, and unfortunately these kinds of circumstances that you're dealing with happen all too often around the country. So I was asked tonight to talk a little bit about potential health effects from these chemicals. And of course, it's a little upsetting to hear about some of these, but in general, you know, as a physician, I've always felt, and I was taught this when I started medical school, that the main function of a physician is to teach. Everything else is secondary. Right? You have to make sure that the patients that you're working with understand what's going on, understand their situation. So that's really my hope here tonight, is to help you be better informed about what the potential risks are. So here's trichloroethylene, and you have the little picture of it here, and if you think back to your chemistry days, right, that's the molecular structure. But what's important to know about it are kind of the more practical issues, right? So you heard a little bit about it. It's been around for a long time, as you can see, right? It's not naturally occurring. You wouldn't have found this before 100 years ago when it was first synthesized in a laboratory, and now has widespread industrial use. And one of the things it's used for most commonly is what they call a degreaser, right? But it's in a lot of different stuff. It's true that it's a very common product. So there's certainly been a lot of studies done of it because it's used a lot in industry, and it's an important part of how we have come to learn about some of the potential health effects. All right, so how does one get to be exposed? Well, as you heard, it can be a liquid, right? So it can be in the groundwater, as is the circumstance here. So that becomes a potential source, right? But one of the main issues that we see with it is that it has a real capacity to go from the liquid and get into the air, right? You think about water, for example, right? You know water can evaporate. After it rains, you see that the puddles will eventually dissipate. That's the water as a liquid turning into a gas. And TCE, trichloroethylene, can do the same thing. So even though it's a liquid, it can actually readily get into the air and therefore be breathed in. And one of the challenges with it is that at the kinds of levels we would be talking about here, there's no way for anyone to detect it. You can't smell it, you can't see it, you can't taste it. So there's no way to be made aware of it just by going about your normal daily activities. All right. Vinyl chloride hasn't really been mentioned, but it's relevant here potentially largely because it too sort of spreads in similar ways. It can be in liquid, it can become airborne in the same ways, and be breathed in. And I would also point out to you that if you look at the structure of it, and I'll go back, you can see that there's actually a similarity there, and they are related structures, and that's part of why they are both of concern from a health standpoint, because it tends to be that chemicals that are similar in their structure behave similarly in the body, right? Which makes sense. So it's not all that surprising that both of them are potential concerns from a health perspective. So let's talk a little bit about that. Get this forward. Thank you. All right. So again, in the spirit of just trying to make sure that we all understand what the potential risks are, here are the list of cancers associated with these chemicals. Now, you can read, right? So I'm not going to sit here and read each one. But I think what you want to take away from this is that which you probably have already figured out, that these are really potentially very harmful chemicals. These tend to occur, or can occur, in the long term. Long-standing exposure to these chemicals, if it's at high enough levels, can increase the risk of these cancers, okay? Now look, these cancers are not exclusive to TCE, right? These are, unfortunately, cancers that happen in the world. So it isn't to say that the only possible way to get such cancers is from being exposed to these chemicals. Well, what this means is that if you are exposed to this on a long-standing basis, there is a possibility that the risk of developing these cancers increases. Okay? It can put you at risk if the exposure is long enough and with enough of the chemical present. Okay? This isn't something that happens in a day. This is really a more long-term kind of issue. All right? So, and it's a variety of cancers. As you can see, with different parts of the bodies being affected. And, you know, it's I'm sure a little bit jarring to hear and see, but again, you know, we want there to be an understanding of, you know, why this is of concern. Now, here are the cancers. Thanks. So there are other health risks associated with these chemicals besides cancer. As if that wasn't bad enough, there are what we call non-cancer health effects. And as you can see, there's different, like with the cancers, there's different parts of the body that can be affected. So in the case of TCE, we're talking about parts of the nervous system, both the nerves themselves and also the brain can be affected. There are autoimmune diseases that can be related to exposure. The kidneys, the liver, reproductive, etc. So again, lots of different parts of the body can be affected. With vinyl chloride, it's a little bit more targeted to the liver, but you can see that TCE really has kind of a wide range of effects. And what I said about the cancers is equally true here, that these are really associated with longer-term exposure. These are not things that happen from, you know, a few minutes. These are things that happen as a result of typically being exposed for really an extended period of time. So, those are the main issues associated with it. And I think that that's, you know, basically what you want to kind of tuck away in the back of your mind. And there'll be opportunities, I think, to talk more about this as things unfold over the coming weeks, months, and years, probably. But that's kind of the quick and simplified version of what the health issues are. So I thank you for your time and for listening.
Thank you, Doctor. So, one thing I want to reemphasize is we're beginning this case now. So this is part of public education, okay? But one of the interesting things about this that I don't think anybody said is that vinyl chloride is a degradation product. That means they probably didn't use it like in a bath to degrease, but as over time chemicals will volatilize, but they'll also change form. And so it loses, I think it's hydrogen. Chemical engineer?
Chlorine.
Oh, it's chlorine. We get chlorine out. Chlorine. Loses a chlorine atom. Okay? And it changes and it becomes a different hazard. So these man-made chemicals, TCE, do change in the environment. And sometimes they have different but similar molecules associated. Okay. So, yeah, please. Okay, so what are the next steps? This is the first step. We filed the lawsuit, and we've gotten the information from the water board who is supervising the site. It's an ongoing site. We're just starting to learn about the processes that Chris told us about. And as we develop more information, we may have opportunities then for you to communicate with us concerning questions you have for Dr. Spaith. So what we're doing is we're putting, there we go. We put together this lawsuit, the law firm's now. It's been filed, and then a lawsuit, what happens is we do a period of discovery and information. And those of us that have been doing this for a long time, what we put up there is not something that we made up. That's the defendant's data. So when people say it might change, the possibilities is that we'll be a little bit more exacting about data collection and look at it. But we believe this is a fair analysis today because we're using Northrop Grumman's information from their consultant. So we filed a lawsuit based on that information. We've got this collection of experts here now going to start evaluating the information. So what can you do? Well, it's a web page up there, Chris.
Well, the form is.
The form is, okay. So I thought we had.
That's the webpage.
The web page?
Yeah, that's the webpage there.
I can't see it.
Canoga Park.
Oh, okay, there it is. Thank you. Read closer. So we put together a web page, okay? And because there are 4,000 houses and how many people, this is the best way for us to communicate. We also have a Facebook page. And by the way, Jordan, take off your mask and show everybody. So Jordan Sassoon, he was in that group. He's a local, he grew up in Canoga Park, environmental lawyer. He knows the folks here, and he's local. And he's helping us too. So he can get in local, and Lanier has local. Okay? So, but this web page we have found is the best way to communicate. There'll be the map will be on there. As it changes, we'll update it. We'll have this community discussion tonight. It's being recorded. We'll have it on there so you can go back and listen to it. And I think this is really, hopefully, pretty good. So we've got something called Canoga Park information. Okay? This is the best way for you to communicate with us. Some of you have already called and you've heard back from us. But as this gets out, this is the best record we have. So go to the web page, fill this out, and let's say you have some concerns about something you heard from Dr. Spaith. This is the way to begin the dialogue. If you're within the area, or you have questions about whether you're within the area or not, ask us that question and we'll get back to you and help you specifically with this. At the appropriate time, probably the end of the summer, we'll have another community meeting.